Hello and welcome back to Like Maria. Today we're going to look at the process of planning a personal statement. This is the personal statement for UCAS, for university applications in the UK. It is of course really important that you plan and organise your personal statement. So what I'm going to do today is imagine that I'm applying for a course in English literature at university, and I'm going to talk you through some of the ways of planning. So first of all, I would get myself a piece of paper, or obviously if you want to type, and I would organise myself into 5 categories, 5 headings. So these I would entitle course and subject knowledge, other academic disciplines and subjects that I do, personal skills, in particular skills for study, personal characteristics, what makes me a great person, and then I would have a category for other stuff, so other things that I think might show what a good student I'd be and how I would be a good person to have on a university course. So they're my 5 topics, and I'm going now to tell you what I personally would put in each of those topics and how I might use that in a personal statement. So my first topic would be course and subject knowledge. And down here I would be writing things like my favourite authors, so I'd put probably Charles Dickens down here, and I'd also put some modern fiction down. I might jot down the reasons why I like English, and perhaps I would put down that I like the historical contexts and learning about history through English literature and reading books. I also like Irish literature and Irish drama as well. And recently I've been thinking about coursework, and my teacher suggested that I perhaps look at some older texts and look at John Milton and his Paradise Lost. So I've got all that down here. Now I need to, so that's my first initial thoughts, and I need now to say, what use is this to me? I need to show the admissions tutor how knowing about this stuff helps. So I've looked at the course, and I know, for example, that they've got a whole section on history and connections between history and literature, and in particular going back to 16th, 17th and 18th century. So if I mention my Milton in there, that shows that I'm enthusiastic about that period, and that also I've read stuff about that early time in literature. I also want to show that I'm interested in Irish literature and drama, so I can put there perhaps that I've visited the theatre and been to a play, and that also led me on to reading some Samuel Beckett. So I'm probably here going to talk a little bit about my enthusiasm for Milton, for older literature and more modern Irish literature, and talk about Samuel Beckett and the reasons that I like those, and kind of bring it all together by the fact that I really like history. So I'm enthusing, and at the same time I'm hinting to the people reading this that I know what is involved in the study of literature. I might also mention a literary critic or a book that I've read, perhaps about Shakespeare, to show them that I know that there's extra reading involved, and I've already begun on that journey. Moving on from that, I've got my second section is other academic subjects. And here, let's imagine I'm studying history and French. And in history, I'm studying the Elizabethans, and I've also got a section on Charles I. With this, I can link nicely back to my Milton, and the Elizabethans, I can talk about Shakespeare. And I can again bring out my interest in literature and historical perspectives. I also study French, so I've put that down here, and we've been doing a novel and some short stories by Albert Camus, and I can cross-reference this with my earlier point about Beckett, and talk about the philosophical movement in the mid-20th century that Camus was involved in, the existential movement. And we could talk about that literature there, cross over to my English literature, and show that I have made connections across my subjects. I also might want to talk about my fluency in French and maybe that I've enjoyed visiting France and appreciate French culture there. So you can see that my other subjects, I'm kind of crossing over kind of skills. I might want to talk about how looking at sources in history, types of sources I've looked at, and maybe some letters from the period, etc. Okay, so that's all my academic stuff so far. I'm going to move now to talk about those personal sections. So the personal skills section, and this is really about skills that show that I'm a good student. I've written down here that I want to demonstrate that I'm organised, that I'm an independent reader, researcher, that I'm good at communicating, both written and speaking, and that I'm a motivated student. So I could illustrate these skills really by saying that I've gone above and beyond, and I asked my teacher if I could do a presentation about coursework to the class and my particular topic, and I could talk about coming back to perhaps Milton or maybe looking at a different topic. I could talk about how I did that presentation. Equally, I might want to say that I'm part of the school buddy scheme, and I help younger students with their reading one lunchtime a week, or something along those lines to show that I can be organised and I am giving to the community, but I'm also very motivated and interested in my subject. So those are the sorts of things you want to put in that personal skills. You can communicate, you're confident. Perhaps you coordinated a charity event, or you're part of the school council, something like that, to show that you can be committed and a good student. So the next section that I would move on to is personal characteristics. This is maybe overlaps with the personal skills somewhat, but I'm thinking more about enthusiastic approach, maybe things that I've been directly leading. I'm responsible, pleasant, confident. And I would perhaps say here, I would put in something like Duke of Edinburgh, or if I were in a school play, and look at the part I played maybe in leading the group. Say maybe I did the route planning, or I sorted out the food for an expedition, or something like that. So I could talk about how I'm very enthusiastic and I kept my group going through a terrible thunderstorm, or whatever it is you want to illustrate that enthusiasm there. Now lastly, we come to a section about what I've called other stuff, and this I've jotted down here. I play the flute, I sing in the choir, I like debating, I have a job in a local cafe. So you maybe want to pull out one or two of those things, but don't just state them. You want to show that you've A, enjoyed them, and B, benefited from them. So you might say something, for example, like my job in the local cafe allowed me to work on communication skills, and I did training on how to deal with difficult situations and emergency procedures. Or as a member of the school orchestra, I have enjoyed the challenge of playing in the Nutcracker Suite, and I really benefited from a trip we did to the Albert Hall for a lunchtime concert. So try and make your hobbies illustrate and illuminate for the reader how you have benefited and worked on those hobbies or your job or other aspects of your life, and how they have helped you. It might be volunteering, anything like that at all that you can put in. So Caroline's now going to show us how to plan for a media or film application.
So I'm going to use Maria's 5 headings to help me plan my media or film application. So her first heading was like course and subject knowledge. So I'm going to think specifically about my media course and the things that I've done in there. So I've particularly enjoyed sort of TV. I've enjoyed sort of TV drama. I've liked the sort of long form TV drama, and I've liked looking at sort of foreign language TV drama as well. And that's kind of made me think about how they're structured. It's also made me think about representation, and also to do with sort of institutional backgrounds. So that's one area. I've also really liked sort of the historical texts. And when I looked at Tide, the Tide advert, I also made my own adverts. And when I looked at newspapers, I also made my own front cover demonstrating news values. For my coursework, I made music video and a magazine. So there I can talk about practical skills, Premiere Pro and Photoshop. Now I can already see that I'm going to run out of space for my planning, because already there is tons more I can be saying about my media course. So there's a start, but probably what I might suggest is to have actually 5 pieces of paper, something for each, because I know that I'm going to be able to fill them all up. But for the sake of this video, I'm now going to talk about my other subjects. And so here I'm going to talk about film as my second subject and English language. And there's a lot of crossover, obviously, between film and media. So something I might pick out there is more about the coursework, more practical. Here I learnt more about the screenplay format. And I might talk a bit again about sort of film history and favourite directors, perhaps. For my English language, I might think about how can I tie this in to media studies. So I might talk about the study of advertising, and perhaps also sort of gender studies to do with language have informed my ideas about representation. Again, lots more I can say, and I think one of the things with your personal statement is actually by the time you've planned it, you're probably going to have too much, and very much going to have to sort of rein it in and decide what things to include. My personal skills, so I like studying independently. And I might there talk about watching other films by the same director. But I've also liked group work, sort of key scene analysis maybe. And of course I can bring my coursework in again, because I had to direct a group, and that obviously shows leadership skills too. Okay, so my personal characteristics. I'm going to say something maybe about deadlines and organisation. And again, I might mention sort of coursework. Because I was early with my work, it meant that I could do a rough cut and get some good feedback from my target audience. I'm going to talk about responsible for articles in the college newspaper. And I also started up an anime society. So again, I can talk about the responsibility of that and the confidence of that, being able to meet with other members of the college that I hadn't met before, but that I knew liked anime. My other stuff, unlike Maria, I don't play an instrument, but I am a guide leader. Or you might be a young leader with your scout troop or something like that. So there's a lot of skills, leadership, etc., camping, lots of things there. I do martial arts, and so that's sort of self-discipline. And I'm very creative. I enjoy making things. I've also got a blog. I'm just bringing my other interests back to the whole point that I am applying for media studies. So that gives me a few ideas. As I say, I think I could write a lot more, especially about the things that I've enjoyed. But it's about kind of pulling things back and making sure that I stick to that word limit. But hopefully that's given you a few ideas about what you could plan for a media or film course.
Hopefully you have now got a selection of different activities and different evidence that you've put in those 5 boxes. If you'd like to know how to write that up, you can follow along with me in a future video which will use this plan to write up a much fuller personal statement, and will give you some tips on how to phrase things. So after today, I hope you know how to start planning your personal statement, just like Maria.